good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome. Whichever part of the world and whatever time zone you are in, thank you for joining us for the 2021 edition of the Black Consciousness Festival. This year, we are inviting you to shift. Join with amazing people across the world as we explore the many ways we, as people of African descent, grow, cultivate, produce, share, and rebirth ourselves. Through our ancestral knowledge, historical legacy, pride, power, and practice, let's celebrate the individual and collective ways we navigate through life. Together, we continue to walk in pride, power, and practice. Enjoy the session.
Good evening, everyone. I am honored today to introduce this conversation on being Black in Europe. It is my job this evening to welcome Whitney Amanda Horsham, who's going to be leading this conversation, moderating this conversation. Whitney has been with us before, but just to remind you, she is a K-12 social, emotional, and career and college counselor, curating therapeutic and creative spaces to support and encourage student development through individual counseling and peer group support. As a first generation Trinidadian American, Whitney Amanda is deeply passionate about being the person she needed when she was navigating the world as a child and teaching young Black people how to love and believe in themselves despite what the world may say. Welcome, Whitney.
Hi.
And so Whitney will bring on Amaka, who will join her in this conversation. Enjoy.
Hi, hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
Quick introduction of Dr. Margaret Amaka Ohia-Nowak. Is that how you say your last name?
Yeah, it's correct.
Okay, great. So Amaka is a Polish-Nigerian linguist, a critical discourse analyst, and an inclusive language and anti-racism trainer and consultant. She is a certified intercultural trainer and the president of Word Idea, a training organization that promotes diversity and cross-cultural communication and combating racial discrimination and the violation of human rights of people of African descent in Poland. Um, Amaka, I am so excited to have this conversation. I love the idea of exploring this topic. It's of particular importance to me as I am very newly Black in Europe. And it's not just as an expat, but as somebody who is immigrating to the country and actually trying to acclimate and not assimilate, but connect, and noticing some vast gaps in the cultural landscape. I'm in the Netherlands in particular, and I was really looking forward to having a conversation with someone who I consider being multi-hyphenate, somebody who has multiple aspects and facets to their identity professionally and personally. And I'd just like to know more about what that might mean to you, if you see yourself that way, or how you feel about all these different aspects of your experience.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Whitney, and thanks for having me here. It's really a pleasure and really gratification. I'm really happy to be here. And to be able to be sharing about my identity, because it's such such a big box, and we could be talking about it for weeks, actually, for the whole festival, purely about identity and about
You
what
heard that, Sean.
Blackness
We're
in
doing the
Europe.
Amaka Festival next year.
No, I don't mean about myself, but just purely about identity and what it means to be
Yeah.
Black, and what it means to be Black in Europe, and what it means that the Blackness is challenged all the time,
Yeah.
but also your identity is challenged all the time,
Yeah.
because this is basically what being Black in Europe means. And for me, being Black in Eastern Europe, or in Central and Eastern Europe, also means a different thing than in Western Europe. So my experience is predominantly living in Poland. I was born in Poland, and I have a Polish mother and a Nigerian father from Igbo land. And I was raised in Poland. My first language, my mother tongue, is Polish. And oftentimes my my Europeanness is being denied because I'm Black, but also the fact that I'm Black is not being. I have to say that in many instances, acknowledged as Blackness, because to some extent I'm Polish, I'm Black in Poland, and therefore, I don't kind of fit into any category without this, hyphens, and so yeah, I would say it's complicated. At the same time, I like being on these intersections of many dimensions of identity when it comes to my ethnic background, to my race, to my nationality as well, but also, even though I feel I'm Polish in my passport, but I feel kind of, dual national or multinational as well. And also, other aspects of identity that also influence my Blackness in Poland and in Europe, that really have kind of different dimensions, but also different meanings when it comes to, especially when I'm contextualized as a Black Polish person, and also when I'm seen as somebody who is rare, kind of, who is not typical in many contexts, not only in Poland, but also in Western Europe, right? In the US, in other countries, even in Africa, like, oh, you're from Poland. So, yeah.
Yes. So no matter where you are, you're seen as a bit of an anomaly. And two things stood out to me from what you just shared. One was, I love that you introduced the word intersectionality, because I think that we need to put so much more power behind that word, because it is so deep in our experience as people, as all of our hyphens, because we all carry hyphens. But remembering the idea of intersectionality puts more activism behind it for me, and more weight behind our existence. And the other thing that stood out to me is when we talk about a multi-hyphenate, and in this part of the conversation, it's about your personal identity, who you are and how you navigate the world and how the world views you. My question, the first thing I thought of when I learned about who you were was surprise. Like, I'd never considered that, honestly. And I was shocked in myself as a Black progressive woman who traveled the world, that I would still have spaces where I'm like, wow, I never thought about that. And then I thought about the fact that I don't want this conversation to treat you like an exhibit, because you are, your experience is normal for you, right? You exist. And it made me question then, what does being a multiracial and many hyphen person, in the sense of identity, like, how do you ground yourself in your identity when every facet is treating you like an anomaly? Like, oh my gosh, you're Polish when you're in Poland speaking Polish, or you're Polish when you're in America, when you lived in America before, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I studied there.
Navigating the world, how do you root and ground your identity when you're constantly being kind of ogled or doubted?
Yes. And questioned and challenged, and yes, how do I do it? It's a good question. I have few techniques. I can tell you about them later, but and they oftentimes, they are kind of because I take a lot of from somatic work, and just on individual level, I try to just take care of my spirits, and just to take care of my inner self, and to really just be present and mindful to my own feelings, like what comes up when my identity again is challenged, or what comes up when I'm threatened, for instance, when I go to a store and I experience microaggression, which may, or aggression or something, or even that I'm all the time, I have to be alerted to experience something, even if it's not aggression as a macroaggression, it can be microaggression. But even like I see myself caught myself many times being in the UK or in the US, so multi-ethnic, multi-racial spaces, where I'm also alerted that even with people that when I speak, that my accent will be heard because I have a Polish accent, Eastern European. It doesn't correspond with my looks. So what will people say? So there is kind of like a constant mental theater, something that's going on in my mind, or maybe used to, not anymore so much, because I think that being a mother changed that a lot. That kind of helped me ground myself in my it's not that I'm a mother who is only looking at my taking care of my child and doing this. I'm very busy and so on, but it's also another dimension in my identity that kind of added to me to this I don't want to say that confidence, but somehow it gave me confidence of who I am, that I am a mother, and this is something that nobody can question in a way. And then I started looking for certain aspects of my identity that cannot be questioned by anyone. And then all of them came together and they created kind of like a hyphenated, as you say, identity that cannot be questioned by anyone because it's an asset. So it's not something that I should be that I should perceive as something that I'm missing missing something, that I'm not fully Black, that I'm not fully white, that I'm not fully Polish, and so on and so on. But I'm this and this and that. And I guess this complexity of my identity gives me this grounding that it's just me. But it also has taken a lot of years to transform and to work on it, with different tools, also individual psychotherapy, with, group work, and a lot of working on myself, with myself, but also kind of like, also what I'm doing in my life professionally also helped me grow and also look at my identity as, as something that I just accept and I acknowledge as me, and I don't try to then be something for someone. So I don't try to be more Polish in Poland, or when I'm in the US I don't kind of act to be somebody that I'm not, or which happened when I was younger. So,
Amaka, can I tell you, like, listening to you speak, I have to be honest, I get a little emotional because it speaks to what I know is a personal experience and so many other people's experiences of identity, and the complexity of identity, and how we can get so caught up in the current of not only establishing identity, which is a natural human experience, but then for intersectionality, having to fiercely defend our identity to the point where we are rabid. We are constantly at war or tense or on guard. And it's emotionally exhausting, and it leaves no room for the work that you've shared, that you've been doing. And I think that is something that is so important for this platform to spread far and wide, that we have personal work to do, and we cannot spend our very precious bandwidth arguing or proving ourselves to people who wouldn't understand anyway, or who might be in the middle of their own journey anyway. There's a lot to be said about that, and I'm really grateful that you shared that. That in and of itself is, I think, can take people light years ahead, right? You mentioned the professional aspect of your life. Can we talk a little bit about the hyphens in that area for you?
Yeah, of course. Yes. Do you want me to say a bit about it?
Yeah, like let's talk about word idea. What stood out to me was the idea of that organization, your organization, and then language around inclusive language. That's something that has been at the forefront of media, right? The things that we say and how we message and communicate, and what that means and how that can be received. I'm curious about what that looks like in the space that you're in. What does that look like in Poland? And what is some of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, as a linguist, I think I've been thinking quite a lot. Well, like, why am I doing inclusive language? Why am I looking at language? And I'm not looking at identity so much in my profession. I do, but it's just, because it's kind of like a background of language. It's not, language is just a tip of the iceberg. But at the
Right.
same time, language really, really reproduces a lot of oppression. And especially in countries like Poland, where the racism on systemic level is denied daily, really daily, in public sphere, in individual talks, conversations, in people's heads. In general, racism as a systemic issue, as not something that is always intentional, is always blatant, and so on and so forth. It's really hard to understand that systemic racism exists in a country where Black community is a minority, is a tiny, it's really like a significant minority, right? So, and I was thinking, like, why am I looking at language? And I think it's because this is the kind of simplest way or the quickest way to also to explain to people what language, like how language contributes to systemic oppression, and how is it how it's visible, like how systemic racism is visible in language and through language, because we have in Polish language at least there are so many like discriminatory communicative acts and discriminatory words and phrases and so on, that you can just kind of at least like make this evidence that it's on a systemic level, even though it's language, but language is also systemic, and it's in media and it's in everyday conversations, but it's also in the system of the language. So this was kind of like a first step, just to show this, of course, to predominantly white people, because this is the audience that I get. It's I educate white people on racism, on anti-racism, trying to apply tools from the US, from Western Europe, and still lacking, some kind of like or missing some nuances, which are, very distinct for this Eastern European context. But, it's been a bit improving. Like, we're trying to do something, but still, language seems to kind of get to people mostly, and because it's such a powerful tool. And everybody uses language, and everybody kind of wants, not everybody, but a lot of people just want to work on their language habits and linguistic tools. Yeah.
Linguistic tools, and I love what you're saying about like the emotion behind language, right? Where there are opportunities to hurt through language, whether it's intentional or unintentional, and really zeroing in on teaching about anti-racism through language, because that is something I think all people can connect to, whether it's sign language, spoken language, written language, artistic language, like really focusing in on what we use and the nuance behind it. There was another point that was brought up in some of the work that you do. The word discourse stood out to me. Can you speak a little bit more about that particular word in the work that you do?
Yeah, this discourse is also kind of a broad term, but it kind of connects society with language. So we use so discourse is a use of language in the social context, basically. So it can be applied to to media discourse, it can be applied to political discourse, but it's something that is also evolving, that is very pragmatic and very oriented on the receiver of the linguistic act, because oftentimes people say, oh, I didn't have this intention, I didn't have this bad, this emotion when I was saying something, but it was still derogatory, it was still offensive to somebody, but I don't want to acknowledge it. So there is a word in Polish, an M word in Polish, which is derogatory to offensive to Black community, and we don't want to hear this word. I'm not even going to mention this word. But many white people say, "Oh, it doesn't offend me because it doesn't offend me," and I'm like, how can it not offend you if it doesn't refer to you, right? And because I have no bad intentions, because I'm so neutral. We've kind of passed we are past this conversation now. It's been officially kind of, announced as a non-accurate word, or as an offensive word last year. But still, there are people that challenge this discussion and say, "Oh, because people are very kind of attached to their linguistic habits and to words that they've used, and we've seen it all over, like globally as well, in many instances, right? So, and also attached to their intentions. So when I say, "Oh, it's so neutral," because it doesn't mean, of course, it does not mean anything to you because you have not experienced that. You are, on the other side, or you contribute to the racial oppression just by being a white body. I believe in this collective trauma that our bodies hold. If we are Black, that we are collectively and historically holding a trauma that needs to heal. There is a lot of pain in it, and white bodies cannot understand this by just cognitively. It has to be kind of processed by body healing, also by white people and white bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I love about the word discourse connects to what you're discussing, and the idea of intention versus impact. And the example I use with the children I work with, because, children, and they say things all the time and don't truly understand always the power in language. And we say it's the idea of the toothpaste. You squeeze out the toothpaste. You can't put it back in the bottle. It's done. Or the car accident. The impact has happened. Did you mean to hit the car in front of you? Of course not. But that doesn't take away from the damage or the harm that it's created. And that's what we need to focus on. It's the accountability and the ownership. And what happens first in that is the recognition of privilege, right? Where it's just understanding how your white body shows up in the world, acknowledging that I am a white body. Even that is difficult. So what does the trajectory look like in introducing anti-racism or inclusive language in Poland? Like, you say you educate white people about their privilege and about anti-racism. My God, what an undertaking. Like, no wonder you do all that work to protect your energy. What is that like?
Yeah. Good use of words. Protecting energy. Yes, I do protect my energy. I try to do that, and I learn. There's another P word. When you mentioned privilege, something sprang to mind was power, that people oftentimes don't acknowledge when they speak about discourse, because and systemic oppression, when they say that, oh, okay, Black people are racist too, right? We know that phrase, but no, it's not true, because there is a notion of power and global inequalities and colonial narratives that we are all globally kind of that we are still in, and we are embedded in it, and Poland is no exception of it as well. And this is represented in discourse, in language, and in many also social strategies, and in many dimensions of social life. But the way I teach about anti-racism is still mainly on individual level, trying encouraging white people to call their whiteness, to see their whiteness, to acknowledge, to just name their whiteness, to just say, okay, because for many people it's just the first time that they have a chance to speak about their race, because it was never questioned, challenged. It never did, it was always a status quo, because everybody's like, the race is not a significant aspect of identity, because it's so it's in majority. So often, so the way I work with white people is first to kind of reflect on how it feels to be called white, or whether they identify as white people in general. But also, I'm now in the process with a group, with a multiracial group with Black women and white women. And what we are trying to do is also to kind of divide this process. It's called Antiracism Toolkit, but we are trying to divide this process so we are not putting, white women and Black women together into the discussion, heavy discussions on racism, but we're trying to kind of, first of all, also for white people to explore their whiteness, but for Black women also to see how does it feel to be in this room with white women and to have them reflect on their whiteness, because it was always the Blackness that I was like, we are also asked to be, so how is your identity? Like, we are now talking being Black in Europe, right? Your Blackness and so on. Like, how would it feel? How does it feel to be, okay, tell us something about your whiteness.
Yes.
So how is it?
Yes. To turn the tables around a little bit. Oh my gosh. Can I tell you, last year at in the crux of the turning of the pandemic, where we were hunkered down, we weren't moving. I was living in Hamburg, Germany for an assignment, and I moved back to the Netherlands because there was no point in me being, locked down or quarantining in a country that wasn't necessarily my home. But in my time there, I connected to these phenomenal women. And we agreed to have a book club. And the book that was brought in was White Fragility. And it was so daunting to me to join a conversation with 4 white women from the UK, Canada, Australia, and the US. It was such an aggressive representation of whiteness for me that I feared a couple things. One, facing that conversation. How do I confront whiteness to white women? And I've never done it before. And I had to share that with them. I've never had to do that before. Whiteness has always been the default. It never was discussed or spoken about in all of the spaces I've occupied. And 2, how do I not become like what Amaka chooses to do, where you are leading education about anti-racism and whiteness? I don't want to be responsible for teaching white people about racism. Personally, that's not where I dwell. And one of the conversation points, it went well. The book club was phenomenal. It was incredible. We learned so much. But what I took away from it was this one question that I was able to ask white women, questions that I have never thought I would ever be able to say. I had to tell them I've never used the word white with white people before. And I asked them, when was the first time you realized that you were white? And a majority of them, I think two of them, I should say, stated that it was well within their 20s that they were made aware, like, oh, okay, I am white. And I was floored, because I have had to know about my Blackness, not only my Blackness, but the intersectionality of my Blackness and my existence, before I can remember being consciously made aware of it. It's just such an incredible thing to see. And I wonder, in thinking about you doing that work continuously, what the limitations, if any, might be in the language that you use. For outsiders would say you're using their language to inform them of something that they're not always willing to be aware of, or naturally aware of. What is that like? Are there gaps in the language for that?
So fortunately, anti-racism processes I conduct with people that are a bit more aware, or kind of like they feel more accountable and they hold responsibility. And this is also a way of protecting myself, so I don't throw myself into a group of right-wing whites or
yeah. You're not going to war per se.
No, that's not me. I'm not trying to convince those that will never be kind of convinced, or I'm just not worth wasting my time and energy. And I also have fantastic colleagues, white and Black colleagues, but also white colleagues that really take responsibility and co-facilitate processes with me, and also help me also dismantle some like reproducing also some structures, you know, by, for instance, like, you know, educating white people about racism. So everything, I tend to take all the burden on me. So I have to do it, but they like, no, hold on, that's not your responsibility.
Right.
I can do that. So yeah, there are people that support me. So I would say, again, it's also a way of grounding myself in my identity, just going back to the first question. And that just like just a group support group, you know, and people that understand, but also, you know, just celebrate me as a person, or maybe not celebrate, but just, you know, just are there to support.
It sounds like they show up for you in a very intentional way.
They show up.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. But other than this, I think that there might be some internalized techniques that I'm not aware of that I'm doing, because still I also educate and work in many processes on my own, and I work with school teachers, I work with, you know, corporate world as well, where, you know, the majority is always white. And I think that I kind of internally decided to teach in a soft way somehow. So I kind of told, I have to admit that, like, I tone police myself, you know, a lot of times. Like, for instance, today, I feel, you know, I don't have to do that. But, you know, if this was a radio or TV interview, which I also do sometimes in Poland quite a lot, I tone police myself. I just not allow myself to express what I really like deeply think, and I really deeply feel, because, you know, I protect whiteness, I protect why, like, I kind of, you know, try to not cause white defensiveness. I don't want to do that on the one hand, because, you know, I'm aware that this also reproduces some structures, but I know this is the only way I can be heard in many instances. My voice can be heard, and at least this I can do. And I kind of, you know, I'm trying to navigate. I'm thinking I'm in the process in the last months of doing, like, being more radical. So that's why I'm also exposing that here, that because I feel there is a lot of pain really just covered somewhere underneath, even in my work, which is really emotional labor a lot of times. That I really just want to be more of myself, and just don't care so much about what other people think of me,
or what being responsible for other people's emotions around something that they need to know.
Exactly.
I love that idea of what you're sharing, because it's something that I have been faced with working in majority white spaces, where I find that militant streak that I have, or that militant air that I have of just being very, like, forward and open about how I feel. I do find myself softening it in certain spaces, because, like you said, I'm not interested in riling up defensiveness. That doesn't serve me. I think that there's also kind of this communal or societal expectation for Black people who consider themselves woke, or pro-Black, or anti-racist, to be in the vein of more of an aggressive approach, where it's like you're putting it in their face and you're facing that with them. And I recognize the value in that. I do. And I recognize the danger and the audacity in activism, but also it's contextual, right? And recognizing what works in what setting is important. And what I took from what you shared is something that I think, hopefully I'm not projecting on you, but I feel is that I do need to balance it out a little bit. There are probably going to be times where I do need to make people uncomfortable, and I do need to say the thing that will make them cringe, because we hear it every day. The things that make us recoil, the things that make us shrink.
Yeah.
And they get to say it unabashedly. They get to say it freely. And I think we do need to take more ownership of those opportunities to explore those things that might make them feel a little uncomfortable or defensive, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and thanks for saying it also and echoing what I said too. And I also see a big value in now expanding the community, Black community, especially Black women community in Poland. There is a growing number of young Black women that really want to take a stance.
Yeah.
In Poland, which I feel very much supported by. This the fact that it's growing, and which was not the case like when I was writing my doctorate thesis even 10 years ago, when I kind of felt more alone or just isolated. Now there's a lot of voices, and really they are being heard in public space, or even in my spaces, in my space, which is for me most important, that this backup, somebody is also supporting what you said, they think the same thing, which in the past I heard from other colleagues and friends from Europe or from the US, but never from Poland, because I basically didn't have these connections. Like majority of my interactions, in the even the last week, why just why, and even today, so it's been so nice now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I want to go back to the conversation about like your identity and how you show up in the world and how people perceive you, because that's also something that I connect with the impact versus intention conversation. It's also like perception. For personally, and a story or a theme that I discuss a lot for myself is that I spent a long time, longer than I'd like to admit, being in a self-loathing space because of my lack of exposure to positive images of Black people. My family is Trinidadian. I'm first generation American. So being Black American started with me. And thinking about the idea of being a person who shows up to a country that is white majority and seeing the people who look the most like you, who are native to that land or from there, being treated the worst, makes you want to distance yourself, where you're like, oh, I'm not that Black. Like, I'm not those people. And trying to be as respectful to my family as possible, there was not a lot of conversation about being Black. So I did not spend a lot of time embracing that. And it took going to a historically Black college to finally understand and embrace and respect and really come full circle. And navigating the world in that kind of chaotic time brought about a lot of insecurity, a lot of loneliness, a lot of confusion, and a little bit of self-loathing, where I didn't really understand why I felt so icky all the time. And I'm really curious about what you just said about how you felt about being a little lonely, where you didn't see enough of what you're seeing now then at what I would consider pretty pivotal times in your own development and building of your identity. Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect, maybe how it connects to the work you do now?
I think mainly when you said that, now times from my formative years of my life came up, and when I was really looking into the mirror and I was thinking, what would I look like if I was white, if I looked like my mom. More like my mom, because in many aspects we are similar but not physical. So I was like, okay, so what would my face be like? What would my hair be like? And I was thinking a lot about it, even unconsciously, kind of imagining myself and dreaming about it, like I was white, but I can't really recall any image that came to me at that time. I don't think there was any image. It was just like kind of like just thinking wishfully somehow that maybe I will be at some point, or maybe how would the world be to me. And I think this was the first time that I realized, maybe no, it wasn't the first time. No, the first time was when I was little, that I was not fitting into the society. It was both in Nigeria and in Poland, but it's a different story. And I think that at some point when I was encouraged at university by my professor to write about racism and discourse, and maybe to look at it as an opportunity also to overcome some of my insecurities, apprehensions. I don't know if this was stated by this professor at that time, but somehow I heard that, that it might help you, this
Yeah.
phrase.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether this person stated it to
Right.
me directly, but I kind of heard this voice that, okay, it might help me. And at first, I think I treated my research and academic activities as somehow as a way of, just going through a therapeutic process somehow. And then I got, it didn't really occur to be therapeutic at some
Yeah.
point. It was just too much, especially when I was finishing my dissertation. And it was just overwhelming that, I'm dwelling on it all the time, looking at these experiences that I had, because I looked at language, and this language I just heard, being directed at me on the streets and so on.
Right.
But I think this experience of this decision of just going on academic path and deciding to look at my life, racial experience and racism that I experienced through some professional lens helped me in at the end of the day, because now I'm more aware like what was happening on the way, what was happening also with me. And now I can also see that on the one hand, the awareness is not helping, because I, see and I, just analyze a lot. But yeah, I see too much, exactly. But yeah, because I'm very on guard all the time, all the time, just looking around and so on, looking at and thinking, okay, should I use it should I record if something happens? So even the thinking that, oh, something might happen. I was in the store earlier today, and there was a bald guy with tattoos in the shopping, in the grocery store, and I was thinking, okay, what would happen if he says something to me? Would I record that? Because I've been having quite a good day, and would it kind of throw me off? And then I started thinking again, it already threw me off.
Yeah. It already happened.
It already happened. The
Yes.
fact that he was not even paying attention to me,
Yes.
but I paid attention to him. I was like, is he going to look at me? And then I was paying attention to him because I was expecting, that he was like on a Nazi or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's the
so,
thing about being
yeah,
so hyper aware. One,
yeah,
a word I started using recently is the idea of being hyper visible. Like when you are one of few in a space, any space, it's a crushing pressure sometimes, where you feel
yes,
like there is no opportunity for anonymity here. It's overwhelming. And then it's what you're talking about, like the building of a narrative around a deeply seated experience that goes beyond your own current experience. It's that generational trauma. It's that the trauma that we carry in our bodies, and how that manifests itself in the way we carry ourselves, in the way we form narratives around people. I have a very similar experience where I have to interrupt my thought process because it's already happened. This person didn't even have to look at you for it to create this paranoia, this panic, discomfort, and you're grocery shopping. You're grocery shopping.
yeah.
And to carry that level of awareness and knowing how visible you are in your space is exhausting. And I think back to what you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the hyphens, and there was a really soothing quality to your countenance, right? Your demeanor, your aura is extremely, like, it feels very even. It feels very deliberate and intentional, which I love. But there was something particularly soft and warm about you speaking about motherhood. And I think I can tell that that's something that you're also quite protective of, because it grounds you in such a significant way. But I'm wondering if there's anything that you would be willing to discuss around what motherhood has done in your experience in being Black in Europe and the work that you've been doing around that.
It's a good question. I haven't reflected on that so much, but I think it has given me a lot of kind of stability in terms of just, I'm here. I'm not going to move anywhere. I'm not going to be running away anymore, because this is what I had been doing before. That I kind of ran away many times from Poland, but then I was thrown back here because Polish is my first language. I feel emotionally attached to Poland. I feel Polish as well, and now also. Given that fact, but I'm also a mother, and I want to create a stable and safe space for my daughter, and and also that I feel that nobody can take it away from me. So being a Black mother in Poland is also, for me, is kind of something that nobody in Poland can take away from me. Like this aspect of identity that is just really it's mine, but I also see it as a way of caring for my daughter, and being there for her also gives me a lot of kind of power and confidence and grounding, and as I said, stability, and just being also treating her as as a human being, and giving her something that I was not given a lot of times, not from my mom. My mom is she loves me very much, of course, but from other people, white people in Poland, that I was dehumanized so many times that for me, like giving somebody the feeling that they are being treated as human, they are just human, is important. And when it's my beloved daughter or my beloved people, it's always for me also very grounding that I just see the human.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. The connection paused for a second. What you're saying about what grounds you in motherhood and discussing your daughter reminds me of the idea of like the future, right? Where you have a more concrete and stable view and vision of what the future holds for you because of this role that you hold so sacred. So what would you say is the future for Black people in Poland in particular? What would you say you would envision for that?
Mm-hmm. The future for Black people is Poland is showing their pride, Black pride in Poland, and just being proud of being Black in Poland. Not only be limited to anti-racism and racism work or critical work or being an activist, but just for being a human being, and for I'm also thinking about the current situation at the Belarusian border, where a lot of refugees and migrants and Black migrants are stranded as well. This also is another intersection of, Black identity and being perceived and racism in Poland. But I feel that, the future for Black people in Poland is getting out of isolation, because we are isolated in many cities and towns and so on, but kind of like getting together, seeking support in each other, also going through collective healing without the necessity of being physically together, but kind of like acknowledging that we are there for each other and not for white people, and not so just being there for each other, and I don't want to say empowering, because empower means sometimes, some people don't need being
Right.
empowered. Just yeah, just being there with ourselves and with our
Mhm.
blackness as well.
Mhm. Would you
Uh,
say it's not empowerment, but more of a pride?
More of a pride,
Yeah.
yes. And celebrating
Mhm.
Black pride.
Yeah.
Hmm.
In a multitude of spaces. I think that really hits the nail on the head for me from what I've seen in my short time living in Europe, living in the Netherlands, is the pride sometimes can be received as a pride in a country of origin as opposed to pride in blackness, which still reaffirms and strengthens the idea that you do not belong here,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So
Hmm.
I what has been important to me and what I love, like Black Consciousness Festival, when I presented, it really warmed my heart. Honestly, this is going to sound crazy to see that it was written that it's Whitney Amanda Horsham, United States. Because I spent a lot of my time grasping onto my Trinidadian ness to elevate me in a way, and not recognizing the white supremacy that's rooted in that in and of itself, where I am Black American and I represent something to a number of people, and having that pride can also dispel the stereotypes, the disconnection in the diaspora, the othering that happens where you are Ghanaian, you are Jamaican, you are um, Dutch or Antillean,
Right.
and
Yeah.
really trying to find the pride in Blackness first. And that all those other things remind people that no, we are not a monolith. We are come from many, many places. And there's a story behind the reason why we come from so many places and we are so present in every corner of this globe. But that idea that you're talking about, it's not about empowerment per se, as much as it's
Mhm.
the representation of the pride of who we are and how we show up in these spaces, and not shrinking so much. And while much of the work will be for white people to dismantle the systems that they built, because that is their responsibility,
Right.
at the same time, we also have to turn to each other and help build and protect and support each other in the work that we have to do for ourselves and our own identity, because there is trauma to work through.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure. So I think the last thing that I want to kind of go into is the Polish language overall, right? I think for me, again, not wanting to make it seem like you're an exhibit or some type of odd being, but there's something really incredible about seeing a Black woman speak Polish, because it's not something that is seen very often. Not that they don't people like you don't exist, but the representation is building. Even for you in your
Yeah.
own country, like, okay, I'm seeing
Mhm.
more people who look
Mhm.
like me. There's always this stigma around how we manage language, this shock by white people, like, wow, you speak so
Yeah.
eloquently, you're so intelligent, you speak so well. And I think about that from my lens, being an English speaker, a native English speaker, and being always wildly offended by that. What do you mean? What are you getting at?
Right.
Where's
Yeah.
this going? Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about what that looks like in Polish with the Polish language?
Yeah, sure. That's that's exactly what happens in my experience. That my Polish is being complimented. That, oh, your Polish is you are so fluent in Polish. Your Polish is so great. Where did you learn Polish, and so on? Even when I was because I'm a Polish language teacher as well.
Okay, okay.
So when I was teaching Polish to students, they would think in the first class they would think that I was a student as well. So they were asking, "Oh, where's the teacher?" Right? So, and I was trying to say, the funny thing sometimes. I mean, it's not funny really. It's tragic. What happens is that the stereotype threat. What
Mhm,
happens is that when I hear this, oh, when did you learn Polish? I kind of lose language sometimes, even though it's my mother tongue. I try to justify that I speak Polish so well that
Right.
sometimes I feel like a caricature, Polish. I feel like I'm using
Right.
some kind of, like kind
Yes.
of compensating and trying to prove that I actually,
Right.
so all the time trying to kind of show the evidence that I actually speak Polish. And
Prove yourself. Yeah.
polski to jest mój pierwszy język, and that
Yeah.
I said that Polish is my first language. So
I love that.
yeah, so this happens quite a lot, and it's said it with great intentions, or
Yeah.
where do you come from, where do you really come from, where all Black people know this, and people of color don't know this expression. So where do you really come from, really? So you're from Poland, but really which is your country? So yeah, this happens a lot, but I speak about it a lot as well. And so I believe that even one person can make an impact. So when the more I say it, the more I believe that people already know that it's not appropriate to say it, but then I encounter it again and experience it again. So unfortunately, we have to talk. We have to say about it. We have to talk about it a lot. About microaggressions like these, and also about exotization, which is also related to that, because when I'm seeing as an exotic woman, when I'm called a chocolate and things like, which if I don't choose to be called, in such a way, or I don't choose. I'm one of those that I just don't like this. But
Right.
there's a lot, but also when you spoke about Black consciousness, and something like, for me, Black consciousness in Poland is really so needed,
Yeah.
because sometimes celebrating or showing Black pride for me is not like, for instance, through exoticizing Blackness by Black people
Yes.
sometimes,
Yes.
African Afro dance, or which I don't have anything against, but it's just not me. Like, I'm
Right.
not this personality. Like, I prefer to be critical, or do research and read stuff, translate and speak
Yeah.
about books and so on. So this is
Yeah.
something that I'm kind of missing, and trying to create the space with a few friends, with for a few Black women, trying to translate books and some texts from English and US perspective, US
Yeah.
context into Polish. And this is what I also feel like building Black consciousness is for me,
Yeah.
as opposed to some
Some of the other
superficial
things.
stuff, on
Yeah.
which is also needed, like Black culture, and but kind of on a deeper level. I would like it to be not for white people, that we are now doing a Black party, but white
Yes.
people are here. It's
Yes.
actually not for us, but
Yes.
it's for you to
For
see
them.
how. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, yes.
It's serving up Black culture on a platter. Like it's exactly what you said about the caricature, where it happens. Like, I think about code switching, where I
Yeah.
change the way I speak depending on the room I'm in, and there's something really inauthentic about that for me. The older I get, the more aware of the fact that I'm doing it, to the point where people will say, oh, where are you from? New York. And they're like, really? I can't tell. And I'm like, ooh, well, what are you looking for exactly? And then I'm like, well, I do have a really strong New York accent, but it depends on the room that I'm in. So it's this idea, like, but I don't want to get on and be like, yeah, what's going on? Da da da. Like, I'm talking to you. I'm gonna get some coffee. Like, I don't want to do that to prove to you where I originate from. So it's that and you show up in promoting and perpetuating Black pride in your way. There's not one right way to do it. It may not be
Right.
donning the African garb, or adopting the language or the religions. It may not be that. That might be inauthentic for you, but it might be in the sphere of education and creating the resources and the literature that can be accessed by people who need it the most in your scope, in your context, which is in Poland. And that's the work that you do to help establish and promote Black pride. And that's important work as well. And leaving the other work to be done by the other people who feel passionate about that
Sure.
sphere of it. I think that's
Absolutely.
incredible.
And
Amaka,
we're in this hair. Sorry, I
yes,
had to say
and it's
this.
going up like this.
Yeah.
And not letting them touch it. Don't.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Don't touch my hair.
This conversation was like, I told you already how excited I was about meeting you and talking to you, and I have to say that like your energy has only reconfirmed what I was excited about to begin with. I felt so bad because you're so calm, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I love you. You shared such important information and perspective that I think absolutely needs to be highlighted and honored. And shared as well. So I really hope that people are able to take from this conversation the little bits of representation that exists in it, because you spoke to a lot of people in the world of all backgrounds, ethnicities, experiences. And I hope you are proud of the work that you're doing, because it is incredible and impactful. And I have a deep respect for what you're doing, because it's not easy at all.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you all for listening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Take care. Yeah. Thanks for this great
too.
conversation. Thank you. Thank you
I
for
will be
your.
following you in the future too.
Likewise. Yeah. And see you in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Right? Oh
See
wait,
you in Amsterdam.
let me tell you how Poland is now on my list. Now it wasn't on my list before, but it's on my list now. So
yeah. All right. So we're in touch. Okay. Thank you. Bye. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this conversation at the Black Consciousness Festival. All of our sessions are available on our website, theblackconsciousnessfestival.com, and on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. All of our conversations are intense, fun, enriching, and may also be challenging as we explore different facets of our history as people of African descent. Remember, you can find more on the festival on our website, theblackconsciousnessfestival.com. Have a good night, good evening, good afternoon, and a good morning, wherever you are joining us from. And remember to walk in pride, power, and practice. Thank you.